Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good to see you guys. Man, we are going to talk about something that's really important to me, and I want to kind of tell you we're going to switch gears a little bit. We were supposed to do week 2 on finances. I came in on Monday and just started talking with Sean and didn't really have a peace about it. I don't know, sometimes I'll be ready to preach a message or talk about something and I just won't get a peace about something. I didn't have a peace about doing this second thing on finances. We are doing some incredible stuff coming up in the Easter series. What we were going to do this Sunday on finances, I couldn't get my head around. And so coming Monday, I was talking to Sean and he goes, man, I don't have a peace about that either. And so as we began to look at it together, we were talking and we were having a conversation, and God had been leading my heart toward Exodus 13, this one particular verse, and it would just so happen that as I'm thinking about, man, maybe this is what we need to preach about, I was talking to Sean, he was telling me a story in his life. I just, because of what I was dealing with, I quoted him that verse. He's like, dude, I so needed to hear that. And it was like God saying to me, back up, stop talking about what you're talking about, talk about this. I think what we're going to talk about today, it goes along the line just perfectly with that video, because I think everybody in life wants to do something incredibly extraordinary, and yet sometimes we find ourselves very ordinary, stuck in the same situations, and we look at ourselves with God sometimes and we go, God, why is my life like my life is? Why is it so hard? Why do I look at the dude over there and he doesn't have the issues I have and he doesn't have the problems I have and he's not going through what I have or she doesn't have to do what I have to do? God, why are you sticking me in this situation? Don't you love me? Have you forgotten me? Am I not important to you, God? And what I want to do today is to show you just exactly how important to God you are. You're incredibly important to God. I want to show you today something that should take your faith and just shove it through the stratosphere. And I know some of you are sitting here thinking, great, Matt, I'm going to come and I'm going to get my faith increased. But my faith is shattered because I just feel like I've been running on this wilderness adventure where God's got me in the middle of nowhere and I just don't like it. What I want to show you today could be revolutionary for you as to why God has you in the position you're in and what he could be doing next, okay? In order to do that, I got to tell you a little bit of my story. When I decided to come here, it was predicated by some things. Obviously, God was calling us to be a pastor, but it was predicated even before that. When I worked at First Orlando, there was a McDonald's, bad for me, about as far away from this church as Tri-County Sports Complex. McDonald's right across the street, and I was a frequent attender, all right? Every morning I would go in there, I'd get sweet tea, and I'd get a big breakfast, which included pancakes, right? And I would go in, I'd get pancakes, and I'd go out in my car, and I'd go back to work, and this was my morning routine. I'd go read my Bible, eat pancakes, drink a sweet tea, and go to work. Isn't that healthy? Isn't there something oxymoronic about that? Talk to God about how to be more like him, and then shove 1,000 calories down your throat. Anyway, I get in the car, and I sit down in the seat, and all of a sudden, I start feeling this heat wave come from my feet, through my ankles, through my knees, to my head, and all of a sudden my heart starts going. And I'm like, holy crud. I don't even know what I said. I was like, holy crud, I'm having a heart attack, or something like that. And I'm across the street, and so I slam it into reverse, I shove it into drive. I go speeding across the expressway, all the way into the parking lot of the church. I go to somebody because I'm such a spaz. Dude, I think I'm having a heart attack, call 911. And then I went, no, wait a minute, I'm okay. And it kind of went away. So I go, never mind, I'm going to go to my office. I'm sitting in my office, and boom, it goes again. And my heart's beating 180 beats a minute, and I'm just sitting there still doing nothing. So my secretary calls 911. I spend the night in the hospital, and they're checking everything there is to check with my heart. And here's what it came to, okay, is I was having these panic attacks. Now, what I didn't realize at the time, I'm like, seriously, God? Why does this have to happen to me? Things are going so good. Why in the world would this have to be a hiccup in my life? And here's why it happened. You ready? I went to a church that the day they hired me, they fired 17 people because of budget cuts. Almost all of them were off of my staff. And I had to take a group of kids to summer camp. Summer camp was a big thing for students at this church. You could have 100 kids in the youth group, but summer camp came and 800 of them would go no matter what. And I had to take 800 kids to camp with me and 2 female interns that were 19 and 20 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, right? And so I worked my tail off. I get this ministry undergoing, and I'm working so hard to make it work. And all of a sudden, my body caught up with me. And I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Man, when I went through those panic attacks, I started thinking, I'm having a heart attack. There's something wrong with me. I started wanting to go home and be with my kids. And here's what I didn't realize was happening. You ready? God was taking me on a journey to change Matt Bartig, to change the way I live my life, to change the way my character looked, to change the way my courage looked, to change the way my competency looked, so that I could stand on this stage in February in 2016 and lead this church, because I was not ready to do it. And God knew that. And he loved me. And he gave me a panic attack. That's what he did. And it took me on a journey, man. It took me on some lonely, quiet days by myself where I was crying out to God. It took like forever for him to reveal this location that we were going to go. But there was a reason why he didn't reveal it yet. And what I want to do today is, if you feel like you've been walking in this Groundhog Day, this spiritual Groundhog Day, where you keep doing the same things over and over, and you're wondering why your life's not as good as that person's, and why your finances are screwed up, and why your marriage isn't good, and why your kids are acting the way they are, and why you wish you had a better job. It could be because God has you in a spiritual holding pattern. He's waiting for you to act, and he has incredible things in the next chapter. And it's just a matter of time if you will act. If you got your Bibles, do me a favor. I want to show you this scripturally. It's Exodus chapter 13. And I want to tell you kind of what's heading up before we get to this point. Exodus, here's the story of Moses leading the exodus of the Israelites out of the Egyptian rule. Now, get this around your head. The Egyptians had enslaved the Israelites for something like 420 years, okay? A long period of time. The reason they became enslaved was not because that they were not stronger than the Israelites or the Egyptians, but because they were afraid and they lacked courage. And because of that, they were taken enslaved by the Egyptians. The Egyptians were horrible to them. They beat them. They reduced the amount of product they had and expected a higher production. They made their life miserable. And God comes in and he goes, man, I'm tired of you taking abuse. You don't have to do this. This isn't something God put on them. This is something they put on themselves. And he goes, I'm tired of you taking abuse. I'm going to raise up a man who's going to lead you out of the Egyptian slavery. And so he gets a guy by the name of Moses. Now, Moses is an Israelite who at the time of his birth, Pharaoh was killing all the children. So his mom put him in a basket in the river. The Pharaoh's daughter grabs him, and he is raised in the king's court. He's given the greatest of education. He is like the who's who of the town. And then he starts getting passionate about Israelite rights and the care for them. And he watches a man abuse an Israelite or a Jew, and he murders him and buries him in the sand. And afraid that he's going to die, he goes out in the middle of nowhere, and he starts being a shepherd for like 40 years. When God shows up and he says, hey, Moses, I want you to lead the people of Israel out from underneath the Egyptian control. And Moses goes, me? They want to kill me. I'm not going back there. And he goes, no, you're going back, and you're going to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And he goes, well, who am I supposed to tell him sent me to do that? And he goes, God. And he goes, I want you to go there. I just want you to say, let my people go. And if you know the story, here's what you know. He steps in front of Pharaoh. He says, let my people go. And he says who? And he says God. And he goes, if you don't, this will happen. And 10 plagues happen. And we know all about those. The water turning to blood, the bugs coming out, all those different things, right? Finally, Pharaoh releases the people of Israel. And one of the greatest scriptures in all of the Bible to Matt Bartig shows up in scripture. This was huge for me. Sitting on my bed, crying out to God, going, why am I in this holding pattern? Why don't you love me, God? Why have you forgotten me, God? God, you told me you wanted me to be a preacher, and I'm sitting here being a youth pastor, and I know you have a greater plan. What is going on, right? Why am I having panic attacks? Why am I going through this wilderness time? And here's the verse that he gave me. Exodus chapter 13. When Pharaoh let the people go. I just want to say this really slow because I want you to get this. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was more near. Okay? So the shortest in between 2 points was for them to go through the Philistine country. Israelites and Philistines hate each other. You can go through the Bible and you'll see where they fight, and the Israelites kill the Philistines over and over again. Goliath was a Philistine. David was an Israelite, okay? So David and Goliath, there's a Philistine-Israelite fight, okay? Now let me read this to you again. And God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was more near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see the war and return to Egypt. So instead, God, listen to this, so instead of sending them the shorter route, God sends them into the desert wilderness, and then he sends them through a Red Sea that splits between two, right? And they walk through the middle of it. Now, let me ask you a question. Which seems like an easier process? I'd much rather take somebody on in a fist fight than walk through an ocean that is split two ways, and the ground is behind, and the Israelites are behind me, and I got to go through the wilderness after I've been a slave for 400 years. I probably haven't had a good meal, and I'm kind of tired, right? And I'm sick and tired of the wilderness. I feel like the Egyptian slavery has been my wilderness for all my life. And now you're going to put me in the desert, and you're going to ask me to walk through a Red Sea? If I'm God, or if I'm the Israelites before God, I'm kind of like, what gives? How much more can I take? Anybody ever sat there before? And you could look at that scripture from the outset and you could go, well, God just does not care about them. Or you could look at that and you could say, God knows them so well that he knows this, that they lack the courage, that they lack the character, and that they lack the competency to do what they need to do to get away from the Egyptians. So I have to take matters into my own hands, and it may look unconventional to a human, but it's the way that will make them follow me most. Right now, you're in a situation possibly where you feel like you are in the desert. You're in a wilderness point, and it keeps happening over and again, and you're going, why is this happening to me? It could be like Matt Bartig. God, before he could put me here to lead you, had to change some things about my character. He had to change some things about how tired I was. He had to change my courage because I told him it'd be a cold day in a hot place when I planted a church. I said those exact words to God. It'll be a cold day in hell, God, when I go plant a church, because I'll be darned if I'm going to set up chairs and tear them down and do all this church plant stuff. That's craziness. Look where God puts me. Don't tell God you won't go to Africa. You'll be African. But here's the deal. Right? God was slowly changing who Matt Bartig was. And he was using a very unpleasant set of circumstances to make me do that. Because he had to start to remove the character flaws. He had to start to build not my courage in my life, but his courage in my life. He had to build back inside of me a will to go fight and do ministry. Because at the point in which I had a panic attack, I'm just being honest, at McDonald's, I was so tired that to come start a church would have been ludicrous. And God knew that. Just like he knew what was going on in the life of the Israelites. Now, I want to show you how we know that the Israelites lacked a little character. If you read down Chapter 13, verse 20, it says, they moved from Succoth to Etham on the edge of the wilderness, and the Lord went behind them and before them, okay? By the day, a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night, a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. God is before them all the time, right? He's always before them. He has led them out of the hand of the Egyptians who have held them for 400 years. And here is their response. You think they lack character? Let me show you the response. Chapter 14, verse 10. When Pharaoh drew near, because Pharaoh and the Egyptians changed their mind and came after him, right? Here's what it says. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And they looked at Moses, and they said, is it because there's no graves in Egypt that you brought us out in the desert so they can bury us? God's before you, you know. He's a cloud and he's a fire, and you know he kind of removed all your heart. I don't care. I'm in the desert. What is going on here? How did I get to this point? I would rather just go back and be a slave. That's what the Israelites said to Moses. Just take us back. Life was better when we were slaves. Why? Because they lacked the character, the competency, and the courage to get the life that God had set for them. Some of you right now, you have been sitting in a wilderness moment in your marriage. You've been sitting in a wilderness moment with your kids, with your finances, with Lord knows what, your job. Maybe you're single and you're going, why am I still single? It might not be because you want to be single or because there's something wrong with you. It could be that there's something God wants to change internally in you about your character, or about your courage, or about your competency before he goes and does this amazingly huge thing in your life. Now, watch what happens next. As if they hadn't experienced enough, he takes them through the wilderness and the desert, and he pulls them up to a place called the Red Sea. And I want to read you this because I think it's phenomenal. Chapter 14, verse 21. God told, in 19 and 20, God told Moses, by the way, to stretch out his hand over the waters and watch what happens. And so verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and he made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided, and the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground. Now, I don't want to just read this and you pass over it. Now watch this. You're an Israelite. You've been in captivity for 400 years. You've been a slave. You've been freed, and you had to feel some jubilation when you walked out and you were like, oh my gosh, they're going to let us just go. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in the desert and you're questioning why you ever got out there. And now God is telling you, as Moses lifts his hand and the sea waters begin to split, he goes, hey, just walk in the sea. Yeah, right. I'm not doing that. And just to describe it a little bit better, look what it says. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground. Listen to this statement. With walls of water to their right and to their left. Think about this. There is a wall of water. A wall. Like 20-foot tall wall. The storms are so strong that on this side, 20-foot wall of water. Holy crud. And over on this side, a 20-foot wall of water. Double holy crud, right? And I'm sitting in the middle and I'm going, what in the world? Some of you guys, you are in between two walls of water in your life. Financially, in your marriage, in your job. You're so ready for God to move and he's not moving and you're going, I just feel like I'm entrapped. And you're spending all your time looking left and looking right. Look what God did to the Israelites. He put them in a position that if they looked left or right, they were going to die. The only way that they could look was forward at him. How'd he lead them? With a cloud by day and a fire by night. And right in the midst of that storm, right in the midst of that Red Sea, there he was. Some of y'all, you've just kind of sat in this spiritual sulking party of yourself going, I hate my life. I wish my life was like his, or I wish it was like hers. Why can't we have finances like them? Why do we struggle every month? Why is our marriage not strong? Why are our kids this way? Why can't I get that job? It just seems like I always get overlooked. And it could be that you are right on the cusp, but you sit down and you spiritually throw fits with God, and he looks at you and he goes, you don't have the courage, you don't have the character, and you don't have the competency right now to handle it. And so I cannot give it to you. That day at McDonald's, that was just the beginning of God going, Matt, your character doesn't match the challenge that comes next. I have to change it. I have to knock some humility into your life. Matt, you're tired. And I need to help you rest. Matt, you need more courage because you're walking into something that's going to take so much boldness. You have no idea. But over the next year, Matt, it's going to feel like so long. But Matt, just follow me with your whole heart. And I will change what needs to be changed in you. Here's what some of you don't realize. Can I just tell you? If you would embrace this truth, you are one chapter away from an incredible new journey in your life. One chapter. I think about your life, Dale Black. You don't have no idea I'm going to talk about you, but man, you want to talk about the Red Sea experience? You had it about 3 years ago, didn't you, buddy? Maybe 4. Is that a fair statement? Yeah. And God started working on your character, and he started working on your competency, and he started working on your courage. And all of a sudden, you're watching his life do this 180. Why? Because that's the way God works. And some of you, I'm just here to tell you, you are one chapter away from the journey that you want so bad. But you need to relax and start to take hard looks at your life and say, God, what needs to change? I want my marriage better, God. Okay, well, what about your character needs to change? What about your competency, your emotional ability to handle stress? What about your courage? Needs to change. God, I want that bigger job. I've wanted it for so long. Yeah, but Matt, if you get that bigger job, you don't have the character to handle it right now. You don't have the competency to handle it right now. It will kill you. I can't let you do that. I've got to make some changes in you before I can give it to you. That might be your life. God, I wish we had better finances, but you don't have the character to match it. And so when it comes time that God wants to give you that, he can't because he knows you won't value it and be a good steward of it. And instead of getting mad at God and saying, hey, God, why does this always happen to me? What if you just looked at God and said, hey, God, what in my life needs to change? What character flaw? What area am I too afraid? God, am I too overwhelmed? And then whatever God tells you, just do it. Cha-ching, that's right. I don't know who did that, but thank you. Boom, I just want to throw the mic and walk off. But I'm just telling you, that's it. Some of you, I know where you're at. You're struggling so hard. And all you have to do is just relent. And instead of blaming God, look inwardly and say, hey, God, what needs to change? Some of you went, man, I've given my life to Christ and it feels like I'm in this holding pattern. You see, go get baptized. You need to start following God with your whole heart. You need to get involved in these discipleship groups that are going to start at the end of this month, by the way. And I'm just here to tell you, you will start to watch your life jet forward. Those of you that are in marriage struggles, man, you just need to identify and be honest about who you are. Man, I never had more honest moments in my life with God than right before I came here when I went, God, I'm just a turd. Let's just be honest. I know you're like, don't use the word turd in church, but I did. Sorry, but here's why I say that, right? I got old Dale over here squirming. Here's why I say that, because he's always saying, you got to watch what you say. But that, just being transparent with you, that's how I kind of felt. God, I'm worthless. I don't have any value. And God goes, no, you have incredible value. I just have to knock off some rough edges on you first. And when I knock those edges off and you get the character, the courage, and the competency, man, I'm going to do some great things for you. And God was faithful, just like he'll be faithful to you. Psalm 46:1, I want to read it to you real fast. Psalm 46:1 says this. I'm going to be up on the screen if you don't have your Bible. I want to read you what it says. God is your refuge and your strength. He is an ever-present. Let me say this again. He is ever-present. That means I can be in the greatest storm of my life. I can be hurting so bad. I can feel like God is nowhere to be found. Isn't it interesting that the Israelites felt like God was nowhere to be found, and yet he was a burning bush before them? I mean, come on, are you blind? What's up? And sometimes we become so spiritually consumed with ourselves instead of spiritually consumed with God that we don't even notice his presence in our struggles. And he is a ever-present help when I am in trouble. Man, if you are in the desert right now, God is ever present in your situation. Do you understand that? He is your refuge. He is standing over you going, I can't give you the next chapter of your life. It will hurt you. So let's work on you. And then I'll open up the doors and you'll go, wow. For some of you, you just need to work on you. And it's going to be okay. In the 80s, I want to leave you with this. In the 80s, this was on every single house that I walked into. This was there. It was in a little picture frame on the wall. It says, one night I dreamed a dream, and as I was walking along the beach with God, across the dark sky flashed scenes of my life. And for each scene, I noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one belonging to God. And after the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand, and I noticed that many times along the path, especially at the very lowest points of my life, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked God, Lord, when you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way, but I noticed during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of prints, and I don't understand why when I needed you most, you would leave me. And he responded with a whisper, my precious child, I love you, and I will never leave you, never ever, during your trials and your testings, for when you only saw one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. Right now, you may be struggling and you may feel like God is nowhere to be found and you don't realize he's carrying you. Don't fight it. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Embrace this moment. Let him carry you and look at him and go, God, what needs to change about my character? What could change about my courage? What needs to change about my competency? My emotional stability. And God, I'll do it. And you will watch this chapter of your life close and this journey that he has set for you open up. Will you do me a favor? Will you bow your head and close your eyes? I don't want you to raise your hand today. I feel like if you're sitting here right now, you've probably already identified the character flaw or the courage issue or the emotional situation that you're in. You've already identified that. And so I simply just want to say this. I want to pray for you. I want to challenge you that if you have identified those things, then run towards God. Don't run away from Him. Run towards Him. Don't sit and pout anymore. Say, hey, God, what steps do I need to take in order to follow you with my whole heart? You may need to give your life to Jesus. And if you do, come talk to me. I want to talk to you all about that. You may need to get baptized. And if you do, come tell me. I will help you get baptized. You may just need to go home and get rid of some things that are character flaws in you. You may just need to go home and take a nap because you're tired and you're weary. You may need to just kind of get some intestinal fortitude, start walking with courage that God will do in your life what He promises. Because you're tired of the wilderness. And you don't have to sit there any longer if you will trust God. Let me pray for you. Dear Jesus, I just ask God that in your holy name, Jesus, that you would come into us and you would show us that you are our ever-present help in times of trouble. Some people sit in here today, God, and they feel so alone. And I pray, God, that they would open their eyes and see the burning fire that you put right beside them, that you are present, that they just need to embrace you, that they need to follow you. They don't need to look at the wall of water on their right and left anymore, God. They need to look forward and they need to walk. And God, I just pray you'd be with all of us. This is something that this is class that none of us can clap. We're all going to experience it, God. So help us. Help us not to sit in our pouting, sad, pity story. But God, help us to get up and walk and find that next chapter as you remove the character flaws and the courage issues and the competency problems that we carry. And I ask these things in your name, God. Amen.